Troop 77 present the colors and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Okay.
We have Carter Mills, Sean Barrett, and Ben Fisner. Friesner. Thank you.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Okay.
I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. Thank you. Well, welcome all. Welcome all. Yeah, if I could have your attention. I'm Randy Rice. I'm the current chair of the Chelmsford Republican Town Committee. And the CRTC is sponsoring this debate tonight. There's actually two debates. We have the school committee, and we also have the select board. First will be the school committee. Just a reminder, I think it's April 5th is probably the big day, right? Is that election day?
Correct.
Set up in the back is Chelmsford Telemedia. They're going to be recording tonight event, and I'll be showing it at a later time. I know we have Chelmsford News here. Do we have any other media? Little announcement, if everybody would, I'll have to check myself. Everybody, please silence your phones in preparation for the debate. The snacks over there, they're for everybody, and they were donated by some of the members here. Okay. We have tonight's veteran timekeeper is Lincoln Clark, and moderator is Brian Latina. Welcome, candidates, and the best. Brian.
Thank you. I always like to give him a hand. There you go. Okay. We've done this a few times, and it's been very successful. Candidates get really nervous doing the debate. I did it in 1996, running for school committee, believe it or not. And there was 13 years of Latinas in the high school, just for the record. They're all out now, so it's not costing you any money. There's a lot of connectivity in our world today, and I just want to take a quick moment to mention that I watched C-SPAN yesterday while the president of Ukraine spoke to the Congress at a time of war in his country. And it was heartbreaking to me personally. But I got on the phone at C-SPAN. I was the third one to call in. So if you saw it at all, Brian from Chelmsford was on the Democrat line, but in this case, it doesn't really matter. I was actually brought to tears because he was talking about the 100 hearts from children that had stopped beating. And I read a little piece from his wife, who hasn't been in the news at all, but they have 2 kids. They're in Kiev. And she's there with her husband and her 2 children. And it's very sad. The number I heard today was 103 children have been killed by the actions there. So normally nonpartisan completely. I have a flag in the back that if anybody would like to sign it, that's a Ukrainian flag, blue and yellow. They, when a lot of the wives and children left the country, their husbands were asked to sign the flag that were left behind. And I wanted to send that to a friend I have in Poland, because that's where almost 2 million husbandless wives and children are now. So that's my little speech about our connectivity to the world. Not to darken our mood today here. Thank you for letting me letting me say that. School committee, we have 2 seats. Oh, I wanted to mention, we have cards that are on your table. You can ask questions. If anyone has a card, write a question on it for the school committee in this situation. We have about about 45 minutes for the school committee. If you have a question for them that might be good, you write it on the card, pass it down, and Paul will come and pick it up. And if we have time and we can read it and it's within the limits that we need to do, I'd be happy to ask that on behalf of you folks in the audience here. We are being recorded by Chelmsford Telemedia, as you heard, and I appreciate them being here. It's a recording, so it's not live today, but they will be running it on YouTube and on our site, so you can watch it later. And folks watching today, we're actually here on St. Patrick's Day. So thank you for attending, and I thank the school committee candidates for being here this evening. And I'd be remiss if I didn't thank all of you for volunteering to support our town and our families, and especially our children and teachers and professional staff. It's an amazingly difficult job, and it takes time, and I appreciate that personally, and thank you for that. So without further ado, I'd like to mention that we had some questions. I had sent a question out to some of the candidates, but I'd like to read that question, and then I'd ask that I maybe get a response either from what you've written or directly from the question. Let's see here. Give me 1 second to resort here. Actually, I should start with the bio. If each one of you would give us a biography of who you are.
Sure.
And I'm going to start at the end with John.
Sure. So hey everybody, first of all, I appreciate everybody coming out, and I wanted to thank the Chelmsford Republican Committee for inviting me here today. I love doing the debates, and it's the first time I've been running a post, so this is a really great experience for me. So just a little bit about me. I was moved to Chelmsford in 2012, and I joined the school committee in 2016, and I'm currently on my 5th year and the longest serving member on the school committee, as well as the vice chair. I'm also an Army retired reservist, so I retired from the Army in 2019. But as it relates to the school committee, I also have 2 young children. So Ella and Ian, who are in the 6th and the 2nd grade, I almost got that wrong, who are really the compass behind the decisions that I make on the school committee and vote for, right? So every decision I make affects my children directly, so whether it's in the middle school or in the elementary school. Since you guys all have known me and I've had campaign promises and things that I promised I would do for the town, there were 2 things that I've always promised. I would never go back to the town for money, and we've never done that in the past 5 years. And the other thing I promised to parents is that we would have full-day kindergarten, which has been in place for just over 4 years now. So with the addition of 22 classrooms and all of the resources, we were able to do that fee-free for all the residents of the town, for people with children going into kindergarten. And most importantly, I think, and I'll just close up with this, I think it's been a challenging few years for everybody. It's been an incredibly challenging time for students and teachers and administrators and all the people involved in the school world. But I will say the character in which the Chelmsford residents in town have carried themselves. There are a lot of towns that don't get along really well and did not serve their constituents and their students well by fighting and just getting into it. And I think the character of this particular committee and the character of the town has really stood above, and Chelmsford has really weathered that storm well. And I hope you'll continue to do that. So in summary, that's my bio, and I hope to be elected to my 3rd term, and would gracefully ask for one of your 2 votes.
Thank you. And Rodney.
Thank you. My name's Rodney Cleaves. Thank you for having me. I'm going to read my bio, a little more stilted than John's, to be honest with you. And I want to tell you that because of today, taking a cue from a friend of mine's bar mitzvah, today I am an Irishman. A lot of green out there. South Portland, Maine was my home for my first 19 years. My dad was a World War II officer, instilled a sense of discipline and drive. My mom taught the importance of a solid education and language. Enlisted in the Air Force after high school, I learned electronics and spent time in Vietnam as an instructor to the South Vietnamese Army during the Vietnamization project. Took full advantage of the government's offer to get a free education. All of my post-high school education has been in night school. I earned bachelor degrees in electronics engineering, computer science, and then I took a turn and went into the ministry with a master's in urban ministry and my doctorate in theology. The first half of my career was in the private high-tech industry. A lot of you heard of the companies I worked for. I worked for Digital and Data General, a few others like that. I basically lived computer history. I worked as mostly in the softworks. I was an instructor, a writer, a course developer. I narrated many of their self-paced courses. I did spend time as a programmer and document designer. In the second half of my career, I found an opportunity with the Veterans Administration. I went to work at the Bedford VA Hospital and ran the IT department there for 22 years. Now I'm retired, but I have time to get involved, and that's exactly what I wanted to do. I can't point to a legacy of time that I've already spent here and any promises I may have kept, but yeah, I will. I'm just getting started. My wife and I were foster parents for many years. In fact, according to the state, we had nearly 500 foster parents. The public education was always our focus. Between natural, step, adopted children and temporary children who just sort of hung on, we've put well over 20 children into the Chelmsford school system. I currently have a 13-year-old special needs girl in the Chelmsford school system. So that keeps us very closely involved with that particular type of department. The school committee, to me, always has been, is the most important public body for our posterity, and I've decided this year I want to participate. That would be about it for now.
Thank you. And Maria?
Okay. Good evening. It's wonderful to see all of you here live. It really is. But I do want to also first start by thanking the committee for inviting me to again present to you all, and to thank CTM for taping it, because everybody gets to see it from home too, if they choose. I've run for one term. I've been on the school committee one term. And why am I running again? I'm running again because we've had 2 pretty tough COVID years. And I think during these 2 years, we had no choice but to focus on COVID and getting through it and getting our children to still be educated to the extent possible through COVID. I'd like to have the opportunity to continue on in the regular course and move things progressively along, which I think is important in education. It's what it's all about. It's keeping things going. And education, to me, is the most important thing that we can offer anyone in a lifetime. Now, who am I? I'm 59 years old. That's okay to tell your age. I wasn't born in this country. I was born in the Azores, Portugal. And I came to the United States with my family when I was 9 years old. I considered this my home, my country. I'm a naturalized citizen, and I'm proud of it. And it's always wonderful to me to say the Pledge of Allegiance, because every single word has a very deep meaning for me. And when I say it, I know the meaning of each one of these words, and I take it to heart. Because when you become a naturalized citizen, if any one of you has gone through it, you take a test, and it's part of that test, and it has a whole bunch of meaning. As a professional, I'm an attorney. I've been an attorney now well over 30 years. My undergraduate is from Revere College, and my graduate work at BC, the law school, was Boston College. I graduated from there in 1988. So, yep, I've been practicing for quite a while. At the beginning of my practice, I was here in Chelmsford doing basically real estate and conveyancing law. And then about 10 years into it, I joined a law firm in Westford with Alfred and Santos, and I practice solely immigration law. So right now, I've gone through Afghanistan, I'm now into the Ukraine, and everything else around it. But the majority and the focus of my practice has always been immigration for the last 20 so years. Things I've done that are important and are an experience I bring to the board. First, I taught at Revere College for several years in the evenings in their paralegal program, which is like social justice program. I loved that experience and I enjoyed teaching because I love education. Then I continue other things I've done. I participated in a board of a credit union for well over 15 years. And this is Navio Credit Union out of Somerville, Cambridge. I was its first woman on the board and first chair who was a woman on the board. And I say that because of the evolution of that credit union. I learned so much from it. I was on its finance committee, which is the ALCO, the capitalization committee, and you learn a lot about finance. Budgets and the school committee are actually very important. And in addition to that, I was the head of personnel committee for quite a while, so I dealt a lot with people and employment issues. And that's important too. The schools employ the greatest number of people in the town of Chelmsford, and some incredible folks. Now, what else have I done that I think is important for school committee? I think when I formed a law practice and started my law practice, I also became not only an attorney but also an employer, which also has given me a tremendous amount of experience. I have 2 children. They are going to graduate this year. They've been through 12 years of Chelmsford schools. And I got involved in the Chelmsford schools right from the beginning when they entered Center School. So I've been president of the PTO at Center School. When they moved to McCarthy, I became president of the PTO at McCarthy with an incredible woman who was the co-president, Kathy Poisson, and in my last year I was that solely. And then I became the president of the Council of Schools for several years, which brings all the PTOs together. I think PTOs are a must part of any school system that can excel, because parents are where a lot of the beginning of life commences in the home, and parents need to remain very much involved, and families need to remain very much involved in what's going on in our schools. So PTOs are a great part of what I did. One of the things I love to do on the school committee currently is being a liaison to the PTOs. And I'm also the liaison to the EL Council because of my background in learning English as a second language in a very different environment from what they face today under the Massachusetts laws. That's me in a nutshell. I have an incredible husband and a supportive family system, and I thank them, and he's here tonight, came to support me, which I appreciate. But I asked them first again, can I run again? And they said yes, so here I am.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I wish we could have all 3 of them on the board. We'll just have to open another slot up. Little more guidance. I do have a timekeeper for questions. So what I'd ask is a minute response, and if we need to extend it a little bit, I might give that latitude. And if somebody mentions another candidate, then I would allow 15-second response to that if the other person would like to say something. John, I'm going to start with you at the other end of the table here. Chelmsford students in the past 2 years have been in an unexpected hybrid learning environment. They experience isolation, excessive screen time, called Zoom learning, masking, and antisocial distancing. Traditional best education practices were sidelined by the pandemic. As never before, parents across the country found themselves juggling online work from home while attempting to be both parent and a teacher while working with our professional educators. Most of that arguably over the internet. The pandemic presented less than ideal educational environment, causing our students to have a variety of educational and social deficits. While you can't recover the lost education and socialization hours, how do you propose to get our students caught up and keep our parents in the education loop? Certainly, this is not a one-year correction.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great question. I think we can actually talk about things we've already started to do, right? So we've actually already put in and added a coordinator for social emotional learning, and we've increased the size of the social emotional learning programs for kids, and we've given a place to house those programs, right? So kids coming, and let me just tell you, I mean, I'm a parent, and I lived through COVID with my first grader at the time sitting across from me getting an education, right? And I think they did. And I got to tell you, I got to witness my kids get taught from a different room or a different angle, and the teachers and the staff did such an amazing job, including the people that did the IT technical work to make this happen. But regardless, I do agree, it's been tough. It's been tough on my daughter. It was not as tough on my son, but there were definite emotional impacts to COVID. And what we're doing in the schools now is we're hiring the resources and the counselors and all of those needs that those students have. We're going to give them access to those resources there. And then not only that, I think just the inclusion now of face-to-face activities is going to help a lot with the children, with the students, even with the teachers and the parents being able to get together and kind of express some other emotions. But we've already done a lot, and we're going to continue to do more, and I'll continue to support funding for additional positions as they come up.
Terrific, thank you. And Maria, same question. Do I need to repeat?
No. Okay. Nobody needs to repeat a single thing about COVID. I wanted to cry, really, the first meeting we had where we actually got a lot of comments from parents after that first meeting when we first had to say no to busing for quite a few students in our town. And I'm saying to myself, what the heck is going to happen here going forward? This is going to be very, very different from anything we know. One thing that I'm very proud that we were able to do was to have synchronous teaching. Many districts were not able to achieve that. And that's largely because we were able to enter into an agreement with our incredible teachers and professionals in our system. They have put in a lot of work to basically do 2 modes of teaching. So coming out of that, we still have issues. We still have emotional and social things that need a lot of catching up and quite a bit of an academic catch-up as well. Positions are in there. I'm out of time.
That works. In terms of, Maria, what do we do over the next couple of years? Is there a silver bullet? I know we got some funds, for example, that the state is passing out. If you had 15 seconds to respond.
15 whole seconds. I think coming up with we've all been trying to figure out what it is that we can do. We've started providing supports in testing and assessing where students are at this point, and then starting to bring in additional tutoring and whatever is needed in order to get them up to snuff academically to the level where they might have been prior to pandemic into a grade level situation. It's going to take a little bit of time. And socially, we've started some programs as well.
Okay.
At every level
Okay.
of the system.
There we go. I did mention, I think, that we have a bell there, just in case we get totally out of hand. I also have a bell.
Big gun.
That's more for the select board. Rodney,
Yes.
would I repeat this, or are you?
No, I'm
you
good. Thank
you.
The salient questions you're actually asking are, what would you do and how would you keep the parents in the loop? And while my response here is 2.5 pages long, there's no way I'm going to read that in the time you're going to give me. What I would say is, what's already in place, I'm unaware of it because my daughter is at the middle school level. So a lot of what's happening, the new things that my fellow candidates are saying, I didn't know was there. So good. Thank you for doing that. Thank you for doing that. My first response, though, was go to the students. Ask them what worked for them, what didn't work for them, and I would do this in small, informal sessions. Perhaps a homeroom class or something like that. Now, you'll get a little bit out of them every morning, but in proper, small, familiar settings, you might get some talk coming back from them. Structured and long-term programs, special counseling, I'm a little nervous about that. But the students, when they talk to you, are basically getting counseling. Sort of a subtle way of doing it, but it does work.
Thank you. And John, kind of leveraging that a little bit, we have special ed kids and we have kindergarten. My granddaughter got to go through COVID kindergarten. That's looking at a screen in kindergarten, and it is said that you don't get to repeat kindergarten. What do we do with the really young kids that missed a year and a half, 2 years in kindergarten and my own area, special education? I imagine that those kids, and I do have a special ed kid, and I'm on a board for 30 years of special ed. We furloughed 110 people 10 days into it, and came back with a telehealth program and recovered that way, but it's not easy. So Chelmsford, special ed kindergarten, the deficit that we might have had in those areas. Anything special?
Yeah, so and specifically to elementary kids, we actually enacted the Strive program, which is an elementary therapeutics program for kids that are coming back. So again, how do you get kids to back in school and happy? You know, if I'm talking as a person and as a parent, you welcome them back into the school with open arms, and you have the teachers give these kids all of the attention that they need, and you give them all the resources that they can to make sure that they're healthy, and you allow the teachers the ability to help kids, right? COVID was really tough, and at the end of it all, right, we're back in school, and the only choice we have now is to put the kids, you know, back in school and figure out whatever tools are available to us with whatever money the state gives us or the federal government gives us to work through these programs and allow these kids more access to the resources they need. And we're going to continue to support that on the board, and if you re-elect me, I will also continue to support that on the board. The yellow sign threw me off, but we're good. That's the answer, though.
Okay, thank you. And John, special ed kindergarten lost out, particularly in this COVID situation for the last 2 years. What do we do with those younger kids?
I don't think there's a student in the district that lost more or less than anybody else.
Okay.
I just everybody lost in COVID. Everybody. We had a meeting and we had a discussion, and there was a point where all we had in front of us were bad choices, right? So the school committee had to make a choice, and none of the choices were good, and we had to choose the least of those. There is nobody, and there is no student that has not suffered because of COVID, and we should do everything we can for elementary, for every student within the district.
Okay.
That's my answer.
And Maria, same question. Younger kids.
I knew you were going to do that,
impact.
Brian. Okay. So here's what I think. First of all, assessments happen early on in education when a child comes in. So I would agree with you that when you come into the K level, teachers are watching you, how you're doing. One parent said to me, after having my children and teaching my children at home, I think they're all special ed. They're all going to need some kind of oversight. And it's not true. Not every student does. Students grow out of certain things, and they may need to be put into special ed or they may not. It's an assessment time, and it's a big time in evaluating what the student's need is at that entry level. Having said this, special ed is one of the areas where we have added in more and more positions, including in this year's budget. And for social emotional, we've also added in 3 social workers this year, which is very important for families.
Thank you. In particular, kindergarten. Can you give me a 15-second response to that? My granddaughter missed kindergarten. She looked at a screen and thinks that's
I
kindergarten.
will tell you that we changed the times for entering into kindergarten. So some parents decided that they weren't going to put the children through that 1 year and to wait out to put them in the following year and so on. So we changed the times and the birth dates to allow more children to take advantage of that because we realized that. I think we also do realize that we may need additional staffing and additional help in those early levels in order to be able to help them out, to grow into the system and be able to achieve at every level going forward. So that is something we do realize. I wish, beyond wishing, that we could give her that whole year back, but we're not going to be able to. But I'm going to tell you something. I think she may become even more resilient.
There you go. There you go.
I'm
Yeah.
going to get a lot of bells.
Yeah, to be fair, Rodney, John, Maria, my granddaughter is actually in Leominster, and her name's Shanley. And the first chance the kindergarten teacher got her hands on the kid in real life, she said, "Shanigan." Yeah, she's a Shanigan. Shenanigan, I should say. It's a challenge in that younger group.
Absolutely.
And Rodney, kindergarten, special ed, what do we need to do to get these kids caught back up?
So you're asking me the second question first.
The second question, well,
That's fine.
the question was along those lines. It's the
I
broader
understand.
question, but go
Well,
with the second part of it first.
My
And-
daughter was actually in 5th grade at Innovation Academy when COVID hit. So I wasn't directly involved with what was happening in the Chelmsford school system then. But I've had plenty of kindergarten children, and I can tell you that a lost year in kindergarten, like you said, you can't get that year back. But at the same time, you can't rescind history, nor can you regain an education that's been lost. The child is now a year older, maybe 2 years older. They need to do the best they can at the next school. But here's the main thing I want to say. Trust your teachers. They know their kids. They know their environment. They know what's needed. They can give a little bit of extra work for a little bit of extra effort for somebody, and maybe some others don't need as much effort. But you have some professionals in these classrooms sitting up in the front of the classroom, and they know their students. And again, go back to ask the students. I know in my daughter's case, she could not follow anything on a screen. She just can't. So she genuinely, completely lost those years. And I'll respect the red flag. Thank you, Lincoln.
Yeah, for those that can't see it, we have a yellow flag at 15 seconds left, a red flag and a noisy bell keeper there.
It's more intimidating than one would think.
It is. It beats town meeting where he yells at you at a minute, though.
But he's got a nice big smile when he's doing it.
This is
does.
why
He
our
does.
meetings last 5 hours.
That's right. And Maria, I'm getting a lot of feedback from the group here and from other folks on the usual question with school boards this past year. So let me start with you. School boards are challenged more than ever on the topics of curriculum by parents and social advocates. As a policy, what age do you expect educators in Chelmsford to teach about sex education? And do you have an opinion on gender education and the race theory with respect to Chelmsford Public Schools and with regard to parent involvement?
So as I said from the beginning, I think parental involvement is important in every single aspect and every single step of the child's education from beginning to end. So I would say the parents should remain involved all throughout. In terms of sex education, if I remember this correctly, the children are taught in, I think it's the 7th grade, health class. It's in the 7th grade. And they begin to learn. I remember very much signing a consent form about certain aspects of that curriculum that was being taught. So I was informed in advance of what was going to be taught in the class. And what was your other, there was another aspect, I'm sorry.
The part, I'm going to say race
think-
theory, so-called CRT. I think that's kind of the question that some of the
When
folks are.
should that become part
concerned.
of the curriculum was the
Well,
question?
arguably, is it being taught in Chelmsford? Is it something that
I don't
parents
hear
could
it.
be concerned about?
I do not hear it specifically being called that. I don't remember my children ever being specifically taught this is about race or this is not about race. I do think it's very important, though, to be extremely aware that we are becoming a more and more diverse group of students and families in our system. We are going through strategic planning right now in the schools. And I think many, I'm out of time, but I'm going to say the amount. We
ahead.
are close to being 30% non-white. And I think many people, when I speak to them, think that we are not, that we are, 90% white in our schools, 98% We are not. We are a diverse group in our Chelmsford schools, and our community is also starting to reflect that.
Okay, thank you. And Rodney?
Well, you kind of gave 3 points for one question, so I'm going to start with what seems to be the elephant in the room. That's the race theory or critical race theory. It's a great sounding name. Who doesn't want to learn about race and its theories and how to critically evaluate it? But since I only have a moment, I'm going to just give you the talking point. It is at its very core one of the most racist institutions and programs I've ever seen in my life. It started off as a research project to see how a systemically racist country can cope. They decided we weren't systemically racist. It then went on to say, well, they started calling it now anti-race theory, how to be an anti-racist, a book written by Ibrahim Kendi. I highly recommend you'd read that. He wants a legislatively dictated, unlevel playing field. They don't believe in equality, the people that are pushing this. Personally, I get a little scared when I see terms like equity and inclusion and diversity, because we strive for equality. Equity just doesn't do it. Equity in some things. Equity in the value of the education, perhaps. Special needs children get the right type of education. A gifted student gets the right kind of education. I'll let you, don't hit it. Thank you.
And John, thank you for that, Rodney.
I'm
John?
sorry I didn't hit the other points, by the way.
That's okay.
Yeah, so to answer your question, we don't teach CRT in the Chelmsford Public Schools, and we don't teach sexual education to second graders. So I've heard all these rumors, and I've heard these incredibly ridiculous things, and we don't teach them. And if you want to protest them, you're protesting in the wrong place because it's from the state, right? DESE puts down a lot of what the different curriculum has to be. And if you have a problem and you think that CRT is being taught in your school, you can come and complain and talk to us, but we have no control over actual curriculum. So CRT is not being taught. Second graders are not being taught sex education. And more importantly, a child can be whoever they want. That's the end of that. Thank you.
Thank you for that.
Shitty question.
Yeah, so-called diversity, inclusion, equity, and belonging was discussed. We went to Carlisle and got an opportunity to talk to the superintendent, and he used that phrase. And someone from another country that's an American citizen in our country asked a really simple question, and they danced around it a lot. And I'll ask it just to say it. Is Chelmsford racist, Maria? It's a yes, no.
I'm going to say Chelmsford as a whole, I don't believe is racist.
John?
I don't believe Chelmsford is racist at
And
all.
Rodney?
I don't believe Chelmsford is racist, but I'm going to follow up with one other thing. I
Please.
do believe Chelmsford can be, not all the time, very elitist. You're not in my group, we're not going to deal with you. And I don't think it has anything to do with race,
It's a social thing.
mostly.
Okay, thank you. That was a very powerful sort of a question to ask, and that was asked in Carlisle to a superintendent, and then they went on to talk about the race theory person they had hired, and someone asked the basic question, why'd you hire him if we're not racist? So it was an interesting question, and then the follow-up to that question was, how many hours is this person teaching or doing? And they said, well, not many. We're teaching the teachers about it. And it took away some of the teaching the out-of-class hours that the teachers are doing. So that's where the sensitivity was. And I appreciate you answering that one for me in particular. John, as a school board member, after this term, what do you want to be remembered for?
Whew, that's a good question. I have a belief in public service. I've always believed in public service. I joined the military when I was young. For me, public service is planting seeds in a garden you don't get to see grow, right? So, let's say next month, let's say I get reelected or Rodney, gets elected, and maybe we get approved for a school project and we get to vote on that and they get to build a school. Building a school takes 10 years, right? My kids probably aren't even going to go to that school, but it'll make Chelmsford a better place, right? And then someday when I'm long gone, maybe somebody will put my name on a plaque and maybe I'll end up on a library in the middle school. But for me, it's putting the seeds in the ground and then building something for future generations. That's why I do it.
Terrific. And Maria,
What do I want to be remembered for?
what do you want to be remembered for after this 3-year stint? Should you win the election, what do
Okay.
you want to be remembered for?
Maria was a school member who listened to all points of view, tried to get as many as possible, asked questions, tried to get answers, and moved education along to a higher plane. I want to, when I leave, and this is why I'm seeking this second term, have brought curriculum to a higher level in our system. That's one of the things.
And Rodney, what do you want to be remembered for after this term?
That's
as a school
something.
board
What does anybody want for a legacy? I mean, some number of years from now, I'd like, if I were even discussed and remembered, doubtfully, I'd like people to say he cared about the kids and the parents. And he worked his heart off to make the school system better. I'd love to build a new school. I'll vote for you if you do that. But that's about it. I mean, we're in public service. That's what we're asking you to help us get to. Frankly, this is the second elective board I've ever tried. The other one I ran uncontested, and that was in 1981. I just, if you remembered it all, just that you had your heart in the position.
Thank you. As a reminder, it's a volunteer board, and there's a lot of hours put into it. I know two of the incumbents definitely know that, and I think the third one knows it as well.
There's no pay?
There's no pay.
There is pay.
I think a lot of times we forget that, and I always like to remind people that's true of most of our boards. There's no pay. There's a lot of volunteer work, and the phone rings at all hours, I'm told. Maria, before the pandemic, we had a national focus on vaping among our youth. In fact, there was a billboard down here off of Route 495 that I had the governor take down. Can't put smoking signs up, but they're encouraging vaping right on the main drag. If elected to the school committee, please comment on our school health policies with regard to vaping and smoking, marijuana and drugs.
Well, it's not allowed, and it's an enforceable policy that it's not allowed. And I think you're correct that during COVID, a lot of things that, were just the ordinary course of business of this is what we need to not have in the schools, not do in the schools. The way that people return to acting after returning to school from COVID, it's much more difficult right now to enforce certain policies because people have not socialized for quite a bit of time at every level. It's not easy, but it's an enforceable policy and it's not allowed in our schools.
And if I could extend it a little bit, do we have a problem in those areas, or in particular those, and maybe I'll throw in alcohol as well, in our school system, in your sense?
I don't think that there's a single school system in the world, very likely, that can tell you that they're not going to have some problem.
Okay.
So that's reality. We've got young people growing here who are going to experiment with certain things. They're going to have to know what the rules are and follow those rules. And we've got policies in our school, and they need to be enforced.
Okay, thank you.
And that's just the way it
And
is.
Rodney, on the same question.
Well, I agree with Maria. We have policies. It's illegal. They need to be enforced, period. I was completely against Governor Baker's ban on vaping until I learned what was in it. I found out about the cyanides and the heavy metals, and the list goes on and on. I can't remember all of them now. And my first thought was, if people want to vape, let them vape. And then I realized they were killing themselves with vaping just as much as they were killing themselves with cigarettes or alcohol or anything else. So, yeah, sometimes government can be a little heavy-handed and come down on them like that. But, at the school level, one of the saddest moments of my life, I used to drive two of my foster girls to the high school when they were living with me. And I saw the kids sitting out by the front door at the high school on the bench there, the concrete bench, enjoying a couple of beers at 7:30 in the morning. and teachers were not necessarily walking by, but were in sight. Nobody was saying a thing to these kids. And what's the sense in having a rule or regular? Just enforce the rules we already have. That's what it comes down to.
Your sensitivity, as far as Chelmsford goes, do you have a sensitivity with regard to those problems with our kids, our particular kids here?
Well, again, my current child, I haven't had any older kids now for almost 5 years. So I haven't been in the high school lately, which is where most of this would more than likely be taking place. My 13-year-old was at Center for quite some time. I never saw any activity there, but I wouldn't expect it in the younger grades. But I've seen kids, when I'm out and about in the morning, I try not to stay home all day. I see kids putting out their cigarette butts as they enter school. I thought there was a legal smoking section at the high school. Maybe there isn't. When our kids were there, I think there was, actually, or at least there was a place where it was tolerated. So, yeah, I'm not sure what's going on with that, but I don't think we have a serious problem.
And John, if I could interject here, I believe that smoking on any school campus is illegal. It's
any property.
Certainly a state or maybe even a federal.
Maybe. I just know in Chelmsford it's definitely our policy.
Definitely challenge. So
Yeah.
you can't be putting a butt out on the curb on the way in.
No, we do not. We do not advocate. I would not vote for those either. I would not sign the warrant for that.
All right, John. Same question.
Yeah, I don't think you're going to get a lot of controversy on this one. Yeah, we all agree it should be illegal. Not illegal, but against the rules. Even in, I think 2 years ago, the high school came in and they presented about vaping and actually added that to the student handbook. Fully support that. In terms of, is this a problem in our town? We don't really handle discipline on the school committee, so we don't hear individual issues, so there may be kids that get in trouble. I think I've heard of 1 or 2 prom incidents, but I mean, I don't know anybody in this room when they went to their prom, but sometimes kids do crazy things at prom. But other than that, I feel like we have a bunch of really good kids that are going to do great things in life. So
You're feeling Chelmsford's under control with those
I think we do well. Yeah, I do.
concern areas?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And we're running a little low on time, but I'd like to ask a question about our budget.
Sure.
Our school budget, like most towns, is the largest portion of the town's available funds. And what items, this is kind of a funny question to ask any elected official, what items would you reduce or could you reduce, and which items need to be increased? And with respect to our current inflation rate is 8 to 20%, depending on what standard you use. If you leave food and gasoline out of it, it's running at 8% according to the government. So what areas would you, John, I'll come to you again. What areas would you, or could you reduce, and which areas need increases?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the first answer is I would not reduce anything in the budget. The budget was $67.5 this year. We've never gone to the town and asked for $1 more, and the town has always been gracious enough to give us the money that we need. We use that money incredibly effectively. We use that money not just with staff, but with programs, and we use the federal money and the grant money. We use all kinds of money that we have to the point now that the district has money put away for an emergency. So if anything comes up with special education or just general education, we now have money put aside to handle that. We're also, with federal funds and school choice, able to give every single student from 5th grade all the way through high school a laptop on the one-to-one initiative. So I wouldn't reduce anything. If I was going to increase anything, it would 100% be teachers, more teachers, smaller classroom sizes, more resources. And if I could really increase it, I'd really push it for that new middle school. That'd be my vote.
Thank you. And Rodney?
I have to agree. The budget is being as high as it is right now, 67.5. There's very little that you could cut out of it, to be honest with you. I went through the budget. I haven't sat in a budget meeting with the school committee, but I did read the budget, and I was really dismayed at how little the teachers at the elementary school level make compared to the teachers at the middle and high school level. It would be a huge burden on the town to try and up their salaries, but I'm wondering if there's something can be adjusted at some point. Probably it's not going to happen in the next year or two, but over time we could consider it. The only department I'd want to see up-funded a little bit, and I think it's doing okay, the people that are already on the committee could advise me on this, would be the special ed department. The opportunity for kids to be placed out of district, more opportunities for better electronics and communication devices that offer accommodations for special need children with hearing or sight problems, this kind of thing. That's about where I'd go.
Thank you. Thank you. And Maria?
Okay, so the budget is looked at very, very carefully. 67.5 right now deals with what the needs are. What would I increase if I could? Definitely, I would look at the staffing and increase levels there, because we are just barely competing in terms of offering salaries. We are not at the top with our competitors. So we need to be keeping an eye on that very carefully. And we're in a renegotiation year on contracts, as is the town and several other aspects of contracts. So that is something that we are going to have to keep an eye on. Reducing something is really difficult to do. I've been in the system when things had to be reduced, and it's really a painful process to do it. So I'd have to think it carefully and weigh it all out. And I think it's why I became a town rep, because I wanted to see overall how things would be in the town and be able to weigh those things out. And I've got that red sign. The bell's coming next.
He could ring his. He could ring his. Thank you. And just a yes, just a real simple answer, and then I would like to go through each one of you and have you ask for a vote. And the question is, Maria, what is your position on mask mandates? Mask or no mask? And I'm gonna hedge a minute here
I
and
voted
say,
to review to remove masks. That was my last. The last vote that we took was to eliminate the mask mandate and make it optional.
okay,
And so I would say optional.
okay, and Rodney, mask mandate.
I'd say no to masks in these days, except in very specific circumstances, like a health office, that kind of thing. But I'll tell you, there's one silver lining over these mask mandates we've had over the last 2 years, which I'm largely against, is if someone wants to wear a mask now because they feel the need, they can do so without ridicule.
Beautiful.
But no, if you're going to take them off while you're in school, why are you wearing them on the bus? Or if you not going to wear them in the cafeteria, why are you wearing them in an assembly, or something like that? It just doesn't make sense. COVID just doesn't stop because you're wearing a mask or not wearing a mask.
Okay, and John?
I also voted to remove the mask mandate, and the buses. The reason they wear them on the buses because it's federal law. It's not us. We don't have a choice in that one. But yeah, generally, I think without the support of the rest of the town and the state and the federal government, all mask mandates have to be enforced by everyone. And we were kind of the last holdout, so it made sense for us institutionally to just say it's time to go.
Okay, thank you. And camera in the back of the room. There are more voters out there than in this room. John, would you ask for a vote on April 5th? And I'd remind people, I should have said something. I put a chart of Chelmsford up here. The school committee members, wannabes, and the two that will be your school committee are in blue on the chart. You can see kind of the corners there. That's where they live. And the select board are in red. And if you look at that, they're on the perimeters of our town. So we've got the whole town covered here. So John, if you wouldn't look into the camera there and ask for a vote and make a final statement. Give you a minute to do that if you'd like to use that.
Awesome, thank you. So no statement. I did want to say it's been a really great 5 years coming up on the end of my second term, and I hope that the people, the teachers, the parents that have worked with me in the past, and the people that have seen the results within the town and the stability that we've kind of brought here, I hope that you will give me one of your 2 votes on April 5th and give me the opportunity to serve one more time. Thank you.
Thank you. Maria?
It's been a true privilege to have served one term. I've tried hard to work on behalf of everybody who elected me the first time. I'd ask you for a vote again to have an opportunity to continue to move education forward in our town. And I want to thank everybody for hopefully your vote on April 5th. Thank you.
Thank you. And Rodney, please.
Thank you. I honestly don't believe I'm running against either of the two other people up here. I just decided that at this point in my life, I wanted to get back into public service, and I thought the school committee was the best place to go. So I bring certain values and opinions that may differ with other people. In the line of the budget, I've dealt with $100 million budgets in the past. I have opposed people that I sit on boards with. I'm not afraid to speak up and speak my mind. There may be a lot of votes I vote against, but they'll pass anyway because I'll be the only one. So I want to be on the school committee because I want to be part of the solution, not the problem, and I want to mix it up a little bit. So your vote on April 5th would be greatly appreciated. I'm also running for town meeting member in Precinct 10, so I'll give a plug in there for that.
Beautiful. Thank you very much. I think we have 3 great candidates, and if you would give them a hand of applause here. Welcome back. We have 2 seats open for select board, and we have 3 folks running. And I'd be remiss again on the map here. The select board candidates are in red on the little map. And this is also a map of our new town precincts. All of your town meeting reps are running for office. You'll see them on your ballot. We now have 11 precincts, so we've been redistricted, if you will. So all of your town meeting members will be up for election on April 5th. I noticed none of them are here. Well, some have changed precinct. Now that I don't know how I'm going to be able to go to town meeting and say Brian Latino Precinct 4 when I'm actually in 9 now. So a lot of folks will be moving to different places to vote. I mentioned that earlier. The folks in the lower section of town will be voting at the town hall, I believe. So it'd be interesting for you to know that. And the reason for that is because we had a 10-year census that we do every 10 years. And we're going to have 3 state reps instead of 4 in Chelmsford. So that's another district that's changing. So you'll see that as a state election coming up. Our next debate here tonight is for selectmen, it's hard, it's so hard. I watched the CBA meeting and that's what they called them. This is select board. And the select board is the highest level of authority in our town. They have 1 employee working for them, the town manager. I believe that's the only.
No, there are accountants.
I'm sorry?
Town council and town accountant.
Town council and town accountant.
Correct.
They are also a volunteer board, and they spend an awful lot of time representing you and your family and my family here in town. So I would love to have all 3 of these ladies out there for the next 3 years, but unfortunately we only have 2 seats available. So you'll be voting on April 5th at your voting locations for select board. First question, and I'll start with Pat. Current residents of the town of Chelmsford, for the most part, have lived in a quiet, suburban, mostly residential community. Zoning changes, large development projects, and urbanization from nearby communities is starting to give us a city-like appearance. What do you plan to do as an elected official to mitigate city problems and/or re-encourage our more New England-type atmosphere?
Well, I think we have several tools that we can use to address that issue. The first one being the master plan. And that's a plan that's reviewed every 10 years, and it gives us a guide for when and how and where to encourage growth and development. So I think we need to look at that and see where it makes sense to encourage growth if there's going to be some, and discourage it on the other side. And we need to engage some of our boards and commissions with that, the planning board and the ZBA, as far as dealing with regulatory issues, the Chelmsford Historical Commission and the Historic District Commission as far as community preservation, the Housing Authority and our Housing Advisory Board as far as developing more housing. We also have an opportunity to work with the Northern Middlesex Council of Governments over the next several months to, we've just signed a contract with them to determine conflicts between land use and zoning in town. And I think it's going to really be critical to see what they find and see how we can fix that to have fewer conflicts between residential and commercial and industrial areas. There's a lot more we can do, but I'm sure we'll talk about that more.
Okay, and Aaron.
This is a very valid concern. To Pat's point, I think that the master plan is a wonderful start. I want to keep Chelmsford the type of town that we moved here for. We moved from Waltham. I don't want to see Chelmsford become Waltham in 20 years. Having said that, I understand that property taxes make up 80% of our budgetary income, and that development isn't going to necessarily stop. You can't stop it, but I think there are ways that we can manage it. And the master plan is a good start. I think we could use a little bit more focus. I think downtown would be a wonderful place to start and really put in a lot of effort to make some of the changes there that are in the master plan. I love the residential over retail aspect of that plan. I think that's something where we could focus a lot of energy. And then I think reusing some of the existing real estate that we have is somewhere that we could focus secondarily on. We have a lot of existing properties that aren't occupied. The 129 corridor, I know the business development team over there is doing a lot of work with that, which is wonderful. And then I think we also need to focus on protecting our open spaces and our conservation land. And we have some wonderful recreation land out there, and I think that should be protected as well. So.
Thank you. And Virginia.
Thank you. So with a population of over 36,000 people and 13,000 households in Chelmsford, I don't think we're any longer a smaller town. So I think the fundamental question is, how do we strengthen and sustain our attractive town-like suburban feel? And with respect to future development, I think that we really need to focus on smart development or smart redevelopment where it makes sense for its location and where it has tangible benefit to or buy-in from the community. In terms of our town-like atmosphere, I think we really have a lot to celebrate in terms of cultural offerings, our open spaces, our center and our north villages, and we really need to lean in with cross-collaboration between our committees in those areas. One thing as an elected official that we've already done is these tenets that I've talked about were part of the vision statement that we set for the town. And that vision statement was reduced to policy, where all our boards and committees and our employees sign off on it. So we're trying to help institutionalize and internalize that in our mindset. Thank you.
Thank you. And I know these folks really well because I got their biographies, and I just realized that I hadn't asked them to give an opening statement. So Virginia, would you mind giving your opening statement for us?
Sure. So my name's Virginia Timmons, and I grew up in Pittsfield, Mass., and I met my high school prom date there, who is now my husband. We settled in Chelmsford about 25 years ago, and we raised our son here. He's now a student at Northeastern University. I am, in my volunteer time, I'm very active in the local Lowell Chamber of Commerce. I do a lot of talks and facilitation for them. And I'm also a volunteer on the Lowell Transitional Living Center Board of Directors. In my profession, I'm a certified business coach. I have 35 years of experience in large company and entrepreneurial environments. And I also spent 28 years in the defense business, where I had 22 years in middle management and executive management positions. I have a bachelor's and a master's in electrical engineering from Union College and Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. And I'm honored to be completing my first term on the select board. I have also been a town meeting rep for 3 years, and I was on the Route 40 study committee. The reason I'm running for re-election is I think we've got a lot of really great things going, and I don't feel like I'm done yet. And I want to continue my commitment to sustain outreach to the community, inclusivity and transparency in government, and focus on improving the quality of lives of our residents. Thank you.
Thank you. And Pat, please.
Thanks, Brian. So I want to thank the Republican Town Committee for hosting this forum tonight, and for Chelmsford Telemedia for recording it for later rebroadcast. My name is Pat Wojcik, and I grew up in Chelmsford and graduated from Chelmsford High School with the class of 1970. So now, like Marie, you can tell how old I am, but I'm not going to tell you. After graduating from UMass Amherst, I served in the United States Air Force and later in the Air National Guard. And while I was stationed in Oklahoma, when I was in the Air Force, I was stationed in the hot spots of Mississippi and Oklahoma. And while I was in Oklahoma, I earned an MBA in the University of Central Oklahoma. Prior to my election to the Select Board, I served one term on the Library Trustees and many terms as a town meeting member. I'm also a voting member as Chelmsford Select Board representative to the Northern Middlesex Council of Governments. I'm actively involved in other local organizations, including as past president of the Friends of the Library and as a member of the Upper Merrimack Valley Medical Reserve Corps, where I've helped during the past 2 years with multiple COVID vaccine clinics and testing clinics. And I bring experience and institutional knowledge to the board and look forward to serving the residents of Chelmsford in that role for another term. Thank you.
Thank you. And Aaron, please.
So again, thank you to the Republican Town Committee for having us this evening. My name is Erin Drew. I'm originally from Central Massachusetts. I grew up in a 3-decker in Worcester. I'm the oldest of 5 children. My parents eventually moved out of that 3-decker into a bigger house in north central Massachusetts, in Rutland, where they live. But Central Mass is my stomping grounds. I have a degree from Worcester State College, a bachelor's in business. And in my professional life, I was a licensed U.S. Customs broker. And more recently, I have become a licensed realtor. I spent several years overseas in China, and I worked for a variety of different types of businesses. I worked for startups and mom and pops and Fortune 500s later in life when I moved back to the U.S. My husband Chris and I are homeowners here in Chelmsford. Blow-ins, I'm quickly learning is what we would be referred to. We're blow-ins. My husband's from Waltham. He is a Local 4 operating engineer out of Belmont, so he operates heavy machinery and commercial construction. And we have 3 little girls. We have a 6-year-old and 4-year-old twins that are in the public school system in Chelmsford. And obviously they keep me very involved here in town. I'm a member of the Chelmsford Mothers Club, the Neshoba Valley Mothers of Multiples. I've coached soccer. I have volunteered at a variety of kind of organizations, mostly child-related, because that's been my world for the past few years. But, you know, my involvement in town government is an extension of this. I hope to set an example for my kids about the value of contributing to our community. So shortly after moving to Chelmsford, I joined the Zoning Board of Appeals, where I've been since 2018. And, you know, it's been wonderful. It's been a really wonderful learning experience. It's given me the opportunity to meet a lot of the people that serve the town on the various boards and committees and to learn a lot from them. But I'm ready to do more now. And I think that my professional background and my varied kind of personal background and my perspective as a young parent in town here would be valuable to the board at this time in our history. So I'm hoping that people will vote for me on April 5th.
Thank you. The flat tax rate or split rate that we hear about is up for recalculation every year, and the select board is the ones responsible to make that calculation. Residents received a tax break in the form of the split tax rate 3 years ago, and the select board has reduced the commercial rate actually increasing the residential rate this year. Would you be in favor of an additional increase in taxes on residents by voting a further reduction in the commercial business? And that couched in, I know you can't look into the future, but with a inflation rate at a 40% high at 8%, depending on how you calculate it, raising prices. Businesses can raise prices. Seniors and people on fixed incomes and to some degree, middle-level people, working people can't necessarily increase their pay like a business can. So with that in mind, Erin?
I think that the initial split was high. I think that it was a little bit too high to go from, a level rate to 1.27. I think that the current board has done a good job of backing down off of that a little bit over the last couple of years. And going forward, my decision on that would depend on a lot of issues. But generally speaking, I probably would back it down a little bit. I don't think we could go straight to a level tax rate again. But also your point about businesses being able to raise their prices, it goes one way or the other. You're going to pay, maybe a little bit more in your taxes, or you're going to pay more for your coffee at the Java Room, So I think that you're kind of going to see that money come out of your pocket a little bit one way or the other. I do understand the draw to keeping the residential taxes low, and that's something that I would prioritize, but I'm not sure that the classification rate is how I would prioritize doing that.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And if I could extend that a little bit, and for the other folks as well, if you have, I think we have 200 Chelmsford Business Association members and maybe 1,300 businesses in town versus arguably 13,000 residences and 32,000 folks in our town. Raising the residential rate would impact a lot more people.
Yes.
So
I think it would impact a lot more
comment?
people. Sure. I think it would impact a lot more people, but also the impact on the residential customer is much less significant than the impact on our small businesses. I think the initial raise in the rate, and looking at the charts that I was shown, the initial raise in the rate saved the average residential taxpayer $500 their first year, and it cost small businesses, the average small-sized business in town, $5,000. So, I think when you're talking about reducing it from 1.25 to 1.22 to 1.2, you're talking about, $50 a year that your residential taxes might go up, and it might save a small business $1,000, So I think that's something to be taken into consideration. It might not have as much of an impact on the residential taxpayer as people think it does.
More people.
I pay taxes on my
notice.
house, and they're a lot, so I don't particularly want it to go up either. So it's,
Okay. And to be fair, businesses in town often live here as well. They see
Yes,
both
and
ends.
those owners are here too. And they don't. A lot of businesses don't make a lot of money. I think the average restaurant income in the Northeast is like $100,000 a year. If you're making $100,000 a year and you have a family and you're running a business, a $5,000 tax increase is a big deal. So those are residents also,
Okay.
and those are people that we have to keep in mind. So.
Thank you. And Virginia?
So I think there's a couple parameters that the board was trying to balance 4 years ago when they made the split, and that was the year before I came on the board. It was looking at how do we give more assistance to our fixed income and our low income residents, and the other piece of the equation, I think, is how do we avoid or mitigate adverse impacts onto the small business community, who I think the split affected the most. As long as that split remains in place, I think it's very important to continue the small business exemption. What I had said last November, and I still believe this, is in the last 3 years that I've been on the board, we get to November, we get inputs. They're often the same types of rational and emotional inputs, and we make decisions as 5 board members. And I think that we need to convene in the spring or the summer and define what is our approach to tax classification. Are we going to go back down to 1-to-1, or are we going to maintain a certain residential factor? And that way, the residents and the businesses will know, and we'll have some level of predictability and stability around this whole issue. And I think that's what it needs the most.
Okay, thank you. And Pat?
I've always been opposed to tax classification to have this split rate. Not only does it impact the businesses more, but they have other fees and other things that they pay. The stormwater fee was one that happened to come into existence about the same time that we first did the split rate, and that's based on the impervious area of the businesses. Every resident gets charged, I think it's $35 a quarter or twice a year now, but for the for like an office park or a store, they get charged based on how big their parking lot area is and how big their store and their building is, which in some cases could be as much as $25,000 per year. They have those fees. They have additional sewer fees that most residents don't have. They have what's called personal property taxes that they have to pay, even though I think that's a misnomer, because really it's the equipment that they use in their businesses. And we don't get charged. I don't get charged for my computer and my furniture that I have in my house. So I think the businesses are treated unfairly when we have a split rate. And I'm glad that we're starting to lower it back down, and I hope we can do more.
Okay, thank you. The second piece that impacts residents a lot, and I actually got yelled at by a business person the other day that somehow it's my fault as a town meeting rep that our roads are in terrible condition. It was kind of humorous. I saw the select board meeting the other night, and they said that we have a deficit of about $39 million over the next several years, and we spend about $1.5 million, I'm just rough numbers here, a year of property tax money, if you will, towards replacing and fixing and building new sidewalks and roads. And in the event we don't increase that funding by quite a lot, it looked like 3 or 4 times per year, I think, again, $4 million, I think, for the year. If we don't pay that, then we'll actually decline in the quality of our streets, potholes, and such. The suggestion by both the town manager and our engineer was to use something called free cash, target that to spend more money on sidewalks, building new ones, and funding that road deficit. That's a tough one. We have 187 miles in town of roads that are ours. We have 3 types according to the classification that they do, and they evaluate it from 0 to 100. And I know one of the folks in this room has one of those roads in his area that's not going to get fixed for 2 or 3 years, and his was at a 60, if I recall. Would you commit, I know there was a lot there, but would you commit as a selectman, and I'll go to Pat first, would you commit half of our free cash to be returned to the taxpayers and half of it to go to potholes? And again, free cash is that non-budgeted money that comes in at the end of the year that's above and beyond what we expected to take in.
I don't know that I would commit to that. I think that's a good place to start, but it depends on how much the free cash is and what other obligations that we might have. And I do agree with the first part of what you said. I mean, as you recall, that last October's town meeting, the town manager had proposed, and the select board had actually endorsed a recommendation that $2 million of last year's free cash go to tax relief. Unfortunately, more members of the town meeting disagreed with that, and it turned out that it was lowered to just $1 million instead of the $2 million, which is very much a disappointment. But I think we do need to wait and see what other obligations there might be. Of the $1.5 million that you mentioned that we use now for roads, a little over 1 million of that comes from the state in the so-called Chapter 90 funds. I think we need to really advocate to the legislature and whoever the next governor is that needs to be increased, because as we hear all the time, the state right now is flush with money, and they could give a little bit more of that to some of the cities and towns to fix their infrastructure, particularly their roads, because they do. Every time this year, every year, we always hear about potholes, and there's no way around that. So that would be my suggestion.
And Virginia, same question, potholes versus free cash.
I agree with a lot of the trade space that Pat laid out. So in the meeting that Brian's referencing, we were reviewing the outcome of a report, and that report also referenced the outcome of a 2013 report, which said if all you do is level fund your roads for the next 10 years, the conditions are going to continue to deteriorate, and that's exactly what has happened. And the state aid that we get has never increased, and in one of the recent analyses that Paul shared with us, the buying power of that aid is down by 40% over the last several years. So we need to do something differently. I think free cash is something where it is situation dependent on what's going on in any given year. I absolutely agree that we need to do more on the legislative front, and especially after the election in the fall, engage with our state legislatures and with the Mass Municipal Association, who's really heading up a lobbying effort here to try to help increase the state aid for our road infrastructures.
Okay, thank you. Aaron?
Yep, so I agree with both, with everyone, basically, that the Chapter 90 funding, and I didn't see the select board meeting, but I did recently just review the report about the Chapter 90 funding. I think we received a little over $1 million last year. Is that? I don't know. Which seems like a lot of money. But we also have a lot of roads, and I actually noticed they compared Chelmsford to some of the surrounding towns, and we have more miles and more traffic than some of the surrounding towns also, which is why we get a little bit more funding than some of those towns. But I agree, I think we could work closer with our state reps to kind of try and draw in more money for those roads. As far as free cash goes, if it was needed, I probably would agree to putting 50% of that to the roads. You know, I think infrastructure is important. Without infrastructure, without roads, you have nothing. So, you know, I think the infrastructure would be a priority if I was going to spend that money. Yes.
Okay, thank you. And as a little bit of follow-up, the comment was made that the granite curb and sidewalk portion of that expense is very expensive. It's a little more difficult to do, although the town DPW tends to do it. Perhaps, and the other comment was, gee, that requires another person to plow it. Sidewalks are harder to work. Certainly we need to keep them safe, the ones that are there, but do we really need to create new ones, and do we need to put a granite curbstone where there was never one before? Do you have an opinion on that, Pat? And take 15 seconds. It's not a real long question.
Yeah.
Avoid granite curbs and new sidewalk.
Well, I guess the reason for the granite curbing is so that the sidewalk lasts longer, so you don't have to, so you're not like with the roads going back and having to reconstruct it every 5 or 10 years. So I guess there are trade-offs there as far as the granite curbing, and the other.
Granite curbing and new sidewalks.
Yeah, I mean, basically, I guess they go hand in hand. Yeah, and I obviously they look nicer too, but that shouldn't be the main reason that you do a granite curbing. But I do think it has been evaluated as far as how often you would have to do some additional maintenance on a sidewalk without a granite curbing.
Mm-hmm. And Aaron, if you would, and again, I'll expand a little bit. The granite curb and sidewalk approach is relatively expensive, but done by a DPW team, according to the meeting the other night. If you avoid that, then there's more money for those potholes and street repairs in the event we don't have adequate money. So would you consider, as a select person, avoiding adding new sidewalks and granite curbing?
So I don't know anything about granite curbing. That would be a better question for somebody at the DPW, I think. But you know, I do think in some situations, some things are worth spending money on that last longer. I'm not sure if this would be one of them, but that would be something that I would evaluate very carefully. You know, in my household, my husband thinks I'm a cheapskate. And so I will tend to buy things, and he'll tend to buy the more expensive version of things often. And I've learned that sometimes he's right. You know, sometimes you get what you pay for. So in this situation, I don't think that I have enough information to make a solid statement about whether I would vote for granite curbing. As far as sidewalks in general, I like sidewalks. I think that where they're appropriate, it would be nice to put sidewalks in. We don't need them everywhere.
Okay.
So.
Thank you. And Virginia?
In terms of the granite curbing, my understanding, and this is also based on input that we got when we did the paving at the high school within the last couple of years, is that the granite curbing is a higher upfront investment, but becomes more cost effective in the long run because regular curving or pavement doesn't hold up over time with plowing and other things. And so that was the whole rationale behind the granite curbing. In terms of new sidewalks, I think that is really a needs-based assessment that we need to look at. And we do have situations in town where parents don't have a safe place to walk their kids to school. And, you know, I think those kind of things we really do need to evaluate and look at. So do I think we need new sidewalks all over town? No, but I think there may be some appropriate places where we do need new sidewalks.
Mm-hmm. And to save some money, would you consider not putting the granite curb in on those sidewalks that we might build, new ones, or? It's probably not as.
I would consider it. I think I would want to understand more the numbers in terms of the upfront investment and maintenance over time and durability over time.
Okay. And just a little editorial, I noticed Bedford along Shawsheen Road put their sidewalk behind the road and through the trees instead of cutting all the trees and making straight lines. And as well, Nantucket and use that same approach, put it behind the road. Hard to clean the snow, but it doesn't take away from the road, and it gets people away from the main street there. So that's my own thought process. Just a quick question, and I'll start with Virginia. Would you consider yourself a fiscal liberal or a fiscal conservative?
I think I'm probably more on the conservative side.
Aaron?
I think I'm also probably more on the conservative side.
And Pat?
Definitely on the conservative side, fiscally.
Frugal New Englanders? Oh,
Yes.
beautiful.
And if I could just make
Yes.
a point, you could probably see that from my yard signs, if you've seen any of them. They've gone through many elections, and since we changed the name of the Board of Selectmen, I had to tape over where it says Selectmen and put Select Board. So I want to get at least one more election cycle out of those signs.
I think I saw some blue buttons with the selectmen
Yes.
word on it,
yeah,
too.
that's a little bit harder to cross that out.
Beautiful. This is a good thing. We recently at town meeting passed a no marijuana in our town bylaw that I think we had 4 different zoning changes to block out all possibilities of it. Pat, do you have any interest in revisiting the marijuana exclusion from our town?
I don't have any interest in doing that at this time. I know when marijuana shops first opened, it seemed like the towns that they were located in were just going crazy with people coming into their towns, and they had the host community agreement, I believe it is, which allows the community to get anywhere from 3 to 6% of all those sales, which sounds like it would really be a benefit to a community. But then you have to take into account the other things that happen when you bring marijuana into a town. The police chief was pretty adamant that he was opposed to it. And another thing that I think is really important is we don't have, the police don't have a way to determine if somebody is impaired by marijuana when they stop them for a traffic stop like they do for alcohol. And I think the state should have held back from really issuing any marijuana licenses until they were able to do that, because I think it's an issue that's going to continue. They keep, every once in a while you hear something, somebody has an idea on how to test, but I haven't heard anything that really works effectively. So I think there's still some issues that need to be worked out.
Okay. In Virginia, same challenge. Marijuana.
Thank you. I have nothing against marijuana users. In response to your question, I don't think this is the time to bring it up with the town again. As Pat said, there were some concerns raised by the Board of Health, by the police chief, and more importantly, there was just such a resounding opposition to it by the resident community and town meeting. And I think that if we want to look at other revenue sources for the town, our time and energy is better spent on doing things that are just more palatable to our residents and our community.
Thank you. And Aaron?
I don't know that now would necessarily be the time to bring that up. I think if it were to come in front of the board again, that would be a conversation that I would be open to. I do think there are concerns. I think that Pat's concerns about testing for being under the influence is a valid concern. But, I live over by the Lowell dispensary, and I drive by it on the weekends, and that line is out the door. I mean, there's money to be made. And frankly, those people are driving through Chelmsford when they leave, So I think if the concern is about how many people are going to be driving under the influence, it's here. It's in Lowell, it's in the surrounding towns, it's in the area. To some extent, I think it's happening, and us choosing not to let it into town is maybe fighting an uphill battle. And I think that there's tax benefits to letting it in. I think that we could potentially make sure that it's a smaller facility and not maybe the one that's in Lowell. That's a big facility. I think we could maybe allow something a little more tasteful, a little bit smaller, a little more suiting to the town, I guess, if you will. But yeah, I would be open to the discussion.
Okay. This question, and I'll start with Aaron. Recent zoning DPW study, it's a zoning issue, but the DPW study said that our sewer is over capacity, and it was kind of a surprise. And along those lines, each department, when a big development goes in, or any development goes in, has to write a letter for that development. And a lot of the times, the folks that should have probably noticed that our sewer capacity, and we have water issues where maybe it's not enough water supply in our wells, they typically wrote that there was no issue associated to the development that was going in. And then all of a sudden, surprise, we hit our sewer capacity, and you can't build unless you pump the sewage into the ground in the old traditional way that we did away with to great cost a while back. I guess who's responsible for governing the town in terms of not being surprised by something like that? Is it those individual departments, or is it ultimately you as a select board member, and as I should say as a select board, you're elected. Some of the town employees aren't elected. I mean, we can not vote for you in next time. Appointed boards, the town employees, they're at the discretion of their bosses, not the select board. So in the case of DPW coming up with and saying, hey, we've got a problem here, now you're responsible for it again. But who's ultimately responsible? Select board? Aaron?
I think the DPW is ultimately responsible at a basic level. I think that they fall under the town manager's management. Maybe he should be held partly responsible for that. At an upper level, I suppose the select board could be held partly responsible, but the role of the select board, as I understand it, is not to be in the daily management of the town. I don't know if the select board is regular reading reports from the DPW about the sewer capacity. I imagine that they are not, because that's at more of an administrative level. So ultimately, I guess that would fall on somebody at the DPW. You know, I think communication is important at all levels. So it is, and I've heard this, that it kind of came up as something that had been overlooked for a while, and all of a sudden it was this big problem that kind of fell in everyone's lap, you know, and that's disappointing, a little bit surprising. And, you know, but as far as placing blame, I don't know that there's much you can do there. I think that just kind of deciding how to move forward is probably the most important thing.
So if I could expand a little bit, the ultimate responsibility for governing the town is select board, or it's the other boards?
Well, the ultimate responsibility of the select board, as I understand it, is policy. We do hire the town manager, we do hire the accountant, and we hire the town council. The town manager's job is to administer the town, is to manage all of the employees. And, you know, I would say that that generally falls under his jurisdiction, if you will,
Okay.
but.
And Pat?
I guess in a final analysis, you could say that it is the responsibility of the select board, because we do hire the town manager, and then it all trickles down from there. We should have known more about it. We should have been better informed about the sewer capacity. Now we get a report every month about how much sewer capacity is being used and how much we have available. The sewer division, perhaps they were not keeping up with what the capacity was when new developments were coming in, and we did have a lot come in over a 2 to 3 year period, a lot of apartments that Brian, you have mentioned several times, that go up around town. So the fact that it kind of spiked, like so many things have in the past 2 years, you know, I guess that's part of how you can kind of see that maybe it wasn't watched as carefully as it should have, but now we should look forward, and we should come up for ways to alleviate that, to create more capacity. And despite what the comment you made about septic systems, I think it is a system that works as long as it's installed adequately, appropriately, and passes all its tests.
Fair enough. And to be clear and responsive to that, that puts the water back in the well fields, and most of it's gray water anyway, right? Okay. And Virginia?
So I don't know what the select board's role was over the last 10 or 20 years with the sewer. I do know that the select board has nothing to do with the reports that the town departments generate for the planning board and things like that when that goes up for development. And those departments are ultimately responsible to the town manager. And the town manager is ultimately responsible to the board for the execution of those day-to-day duties. One of the things that, and I agree that, you know, we are where we are right now, and we need to kind of look at where we go going forward. But one of the things that we did do 2 years ago, and it wasn't completed, so we reset the goal again in the last year, is to do a lessons learned analysis on what happened with the sewer and the sewer capacity. So, and I think that's important in as much as anything that you can learn from that to apply going forward. And so that's one thing that we did with our goals with the town managers, to really try to understand what happened.
Okay, thank you. If I could expand a little bit on governance, town government elected boards like the select board can be removed from office by the next election. Town employees, appointees, unelected outside agencies. We hear of MCOG and I think the Middlesex 3-4 Development Coalition. I've heard Economic Development Commission appointed or even town employees, contractors. The town, which is all the residents, it's not the town of Chelmsford employees, but the town or the residents. They really only can vote for the elected boards. So in terms of governance, if the planning board or an individual outside agency makes a decision that impacts our town, is the select board ultimately responsible for those decisions? And how do the voters get to impact that, or you know, my example is, you know, some of these development projects where we think that something is not following our bylaw. Who do I go to if the planning board says, sorry, we made a mistake? Is that the select board, in your opinion? And Virginia?
I don't know that it's the select board's purview to determine whether or not we're following the zoning bylaws, and we get a lot of we do get inquiries in through the select board. What I have typically done with it is taken it to town council and back to the planning board as their liaison to try to do due diligence on the question and really understand whether or not you know, there's an issue that needs to be addressed. I don't think that the select board has the expertise or the jurisdiction on zoning. And so when those kind of concerns are raised to us, that's been my approach, is to work it with the town council and the town manager and whoever the appropriate board lead is.
Mm-hmm. And to expand on that a little bit, if I, as a resident, as an example, disagree with the residential units going in an industrial area, which I've done, and the planning board says we can do it, and they go ahead and do it, and I go to the select board, and you tell me, well, look at the plan. Well, they're not ultimately responsible, are they? As a resident, I'd have to hire a lawyer and go to the land court and spend $30,000-$40,000. Versus the select board could go and say, could you prove that this is a legal action? You know, Mr. Latina, town resident over there, says that, hey, my read of that law says it's not. Planning board already approved it, they're not going to go back on it. So can I come to you, or is it just too bad I have to hire a lawyer?
I'm going to go back to what I said. When you come to me, I take it to our town council and the planning board, because we don't have the expertise to put another board on trial, if you will.
And the select board hired that attorney, that town council.
Correct. So they're accountable to us in that capacity. And so when I get those types of concerns, I work it that way. I don't know that the select board has any authority over the planning board or any other elected board in town. And in fact, the way the charter lays it out, those boards are autonomous. Those elected boards are autonomous.
And the planning board has the same attorney, so it's kind of a sticky issue if you ask him the same question, him or her the same question.
I think that we hire town council to act in the best interest of the town and the law.
Okay.
So.
Okay.
If I were to disagree with council or challenge it, I would ask those questions. But I don't always have the expertise to interpret the law, Brian.
Okay. Thank you. Aaron?
To Virginia's point, you know, we're not lawyers. That's why we have town council. I think in regard to if there was a question about whether the planning board was doing something that was illegal, that would be something that we should send to town council. If your question is if the public brings something to select board that they disagree with that the planning board did, you know, I think that that's something that select board should be able to address with the planning board, maybe with town council present. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm not sure how to best answer that question. It's a complicated question.
The resident doesn't have access to the
To town
town council in the same way the select board and planning board.
Well,
and
yeah, I
it's
mean, I think
usually
the-
the same person. That's kind of my challenge to you.
I think the
from a governance
residents
point
should
of
be
view.
able to come to select board with, you know, whatever concerns they have. And the select board should be able to kind of challenge the planning board, in your example, to how they made their decision and, you know, if there was a legal problem with it.
Get a legal
and I think that
opinion
town
from-
council
through
should be
your-
able to provide the expertise that the select board doesn't have to
Yep.
make that determination as well,
Good.
so.
Okay. And Pat?
Well, the planning board is an elected body in the town of Chelmsford, so as far as I'm concerned, the select board has no authority over them. They're an independent body. If they issue something, a permit or a site plan that you disagree with, There is an option to remove the planning board members that you, Brian, could undertake. Granted, it's not the easiest process to go through, but it is a possibility. And as far as justifying what it is that they've ruled, I know all those boards do issue sometimes quite lengthy decisions where they take great pains to explain why it is they're voting one way or another. So I think there are other options than bringing it to the select board. And there are other elected boards in the same situation, like the Board of Health. During the past 2 years, there have been situations where, maybe the Board of Health has issued COVID restrictions that some members of the board wouldn't always agree with. But, they're also an elected board, and they should have the authority to do what they think is best in the area of their expertise.
Okay. In terms of governance, I guess I'm hearing that the boards are independent, and I know the Board of Health has no oversight. They did make that statement a while back, that there is not even a Massachusetts oversight. So the challenge I'm throwing out there is, from a legal point of view, if a bylaw was violated, or if a state statute was violated, or if they just made a good, reasonable mistake and put a chemical plant next to a residential place, which is not legal in our bylaws and in other state statutes, what do we do as a resident? My only thought is I'd come to the select board, because you have 3 people working for you versus, I assume, ultimate responsibility in the town. That was kind of my challenge. Your thoughts?
The 3 persons being the Board of Health?
No, the 3 persons being town manager,
town accountant,
treasurer, and the town council.
Well, I guess I would say that if it's an individual that feels that there's something that's opposed, that is not in line with the state law, you do have the option, as you said, to sue that board. Sometimes that does cost a little bit of money. If it's that you feel that they have violated a law, that's a tough one. I mean, that's probably something that you could bring to the board, and if they agree, then would ask our town council to take your side on that. So I guess there are other options.
Okay. Any other comments from? I gave her a little more time. No? Okay. Okay. There's a warehouse question. I don't know that belongs in a select board meeting, but discussion. But and I'll throw it out there since it was presented a couple of times here. Pat, are you in support of the warehouse proposal for River Neck Road?
That is under the discussion with the planning board right now, and as I said, I don't like to try to get into their business while they're in deliberations. But I mean, one point I will make, kind of to go back to your very first question that you asked us, the last big development that was just brought to the town, the UMass Lowell West Campus redevelopment. The developers there reached out to the community and to the abutters and did a lot of work as far as creating a development agreement with the town. And it's the first time that I've ever been involved in a development agreement. And they made extra efforts to mitigate the impacts that they were going to have on the abutters, on the traffic, on lighting in the area, on open space. Perhaps if the developers on the River Neck Road project were a little bit more proactive like that, it might have a different result. So that's all I'll say about that.
Okay, great. And Virginia?
So I will just say, as a resident, I think that the initial proposal put forward by the developer for the River Neck Road warehouse doesn't fit. I think it's far too large. I'm very concerned about exacerbating truck traffic in town. We have truck issues all over town. And I don't think that this proposal, the way it was initially structured, is going to, it's not only going to not help it, it's going to hurt it and make it worse. And I don't think you put something that large with extensive day and night operations next to a residential community. I think that what our planning board does is there are certain constraints that they have if someone comes forward and it's within the by right and the legal and is legal under the current zoning, they can't fight that, but where they do have power is in the special permitting aspect. And I think recently with River Neck Road and with a couple of other projects in town, they've been doing the right thing, pushing back on the special permitting aspect.
Thank you. And Aaron?
I am generally not in agreement. I have seen the developer reach out to the community a little bit. They did open the doors over there last month and invite people in to see the facility, and I went to that meeting and I saw their presentation. And I honestly, I think it's not like the UMass project. I don't ever see them getting the kind of support from the community that that project got. And even without the size of the warehouse concerns and everything else, I think that the traffic alone, the truck traffic on River Neck Road is unimaginable. It's unimaginable that that project could move in there and be successful and not be a detriment to the community, to the East Chelmsford community in particular. But that does lie with the planning board, and businesses do have rights in regard to what they do with their land. What the planning board does going forward with that, I think if they really are not in favor, they're going to have to think outside the box, and they're going to have to use kind of all the power that they have to prevent that in whatever way they can. So, good luck to them. It's a big task.
Job. And I guess proof in the pudding is we have 2 open seats for the planning board and only 1 person on the ballot. So expect to do some write-ins and someone pops up that doesn't realize what the job is, I suspect. We're kind of coming on that 9 o'clock hour. There's 100 more questions to ask, so if you don't mind staying till midnight, that would be good. Again, I would love to have you look at the camera there because there's a lot more voters there than here. And Pat, would you give it your best to get people to vote for you for select person?
Okay. Thanks, Brian. And once again, I want to thank the Republican Town Committee for hosting this forum, and the Chelmsford Telemedia for recording and later broadcast, and Brian for moderating, and the other candidates for being here, for the audience, the great audience that we have, and the voters of Chelmsford who have shown confidence in me in the past. I surely appreciate that, and I hope on April 5th you'll show that confidence in me again. And I just want to remind everybody, as Brian did earlier, that most everybody in town is going to be in a new precinct now, which may or may not change where you vote, but you'll be getting your census and a postcard in the mail sometime in the next few days. It supposedly was sent out on Monday, so you should get that very soon, and so you'll know where to vote. And I look forward to seeing everybody at the polls. So polls are open from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. April 5th. Thank you.
Thank you. And Aaron, please.
I'd also like to thank you, Brian, and the Republican Town Committee and the audience for being here tonight and for giving me the opportunity to tell the town more about myself. And, I'd like to thank everybody in town who has kind of helped me over the last few weeks. There's been a lot of meetings, there's been a lot of conversations, there's been a lot of numbers and a lot of information. And, I don't know it all. I haven't been on the board. I don't have the experience that some of the other people in town do. But they've all been so willing to share all their knowledge with me. And, I've really enjoyed it, and I have a lot to learn, but I'm really very much looking forward to learning more and to taking kind of my experience and my perspective and using that to help the town move forward and hopefully do some wonderful things. So I hope the people will vote for me on April 5th.
There you
yes.
go. Always ask for the
yes.
vote. And Virginia.
So again, I also would like to thank the Republican Town Committee and Chelmsford Telemedia and the people here and people at home for participating. My first term as a select board member has truly been one of the greatest privileges of my life. And when I first ran for select board, I committed to combine my transferable skills and my willingness to learn about municipal government toward the betterment of our community. I think I've invested the time to do that. I continue to advocate for transparency and planning and inclusive decisions where we're pulling in other boards and committees or our residents into our decision-making. And as I move forward in my second term, my focus would be on the quality of lives for our diverse community, on our critical infrastructure needs, such as our road and sewer that we've talked about this evening, and on continuing to make sure we're doing planning with collaborative execution and trust. And with that, I want to thank everyone for their support during my first term and also during this campaign, and I respectfully ask for one of your 2 votes on April 5th. Thank you.
Fantastic. And as a reminder, the Ukrainian flag is in the back if anyone wanted to put their name down on it so they can send it to Poland. I want to, again, thank you, you 3, and I wish we could vote for all 3 of you. Whoever doesn't make it, please stay involved. And there's a planning board seat there, just saying. And write your names in. Thank you so much.